of our skin wouldn't mean any suffering. I wish that the love I embrace wouldn't mean that I'd die tomorrow.
Time ticking on made it easier. I wish singing this song made it better. I wish everyone cared for everyone. I wish there'd be no more night, only sun. Ooh. Wishing on a star will change it. We've got to be better. We've got to be better. There's work to be done. To be better, to be better, no, better, no. We've got to be better. We've got to be better. We've got to be better.
We've got to be better. Wake up and change it. We've got to be better. Wake up and change it.
Good evening, everyone. Shout out to the DJ. I tried to propose a song. Thank God I'm not the person who gets to decide on the songs that get played here. Shout out to the DJ. That's such a beautiful song. Please, I don't know what it is, so please let us know what the name of that song is. Welcome, everybody. I hope you're well. Welcome to another crossover session if you're part of the community. Thank you for always showing up. We definitely don't take it for granted. I hope you're well. I hope that your week's been good so far. And if you're here for the very first time, welcome. CrossOvr is an interdenominational community of young believers, and what we do a couple of times a week, twice a week, just talk on different issues of faith, issues that are affecting us day to day, and that's what we're going to be doing today. We're all over social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. So welcome, and we really look forward to having a discussion with you. Before we really dig in, I'm going to ask someone to pray for us as we start. Who am I going to? Who do I? Oh, I hope she agrees. Elaine, do you mind praying for us? Ah, she agreed. Yay. We can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Yes.
Okay, let's pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I'd like to thank you once again for giving us another opportunity where we can come to you in prayer. As we're about to start this session, we ask that you may be with us all individually, that the words that may be shared may enrich us in whatever situations that we may find ourselves in. I pray all this in your gracious and loving name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Elaine. So today we're going to be talking about grief. Why? I don't know about you, but 2020 has been a bit intense, depending on what you face this year. What we're really seeking to talk about today is maybe not necessarily just grieving. You may have lost family members, you may have lost a job, but also just grieving what we knew life to be. I don't know about you, but I don't necessarily do the whole New Year's resolution, but you sort of just like, every time you begin a year, you have a thought of what the years to come and what it's going to be. And 2020 has definitely not turned out how anybody thought it was going to be. I'm quite sure about that. And helping us to just navigate this discussion is Khosi Jiyane. She has kindly agreed to join us again. She still loves us, so we're very grateful, And I'm just going to read a bit about her before we get into the conversation. So Khosi is a registered clinical psychologist and an expert with more than a decade's experience in facilitating and coaching transformative learning interventions focused on influence, crucial conversations in negotiation, accountability, and change. And if she seems very familiar to you, it's because you may have seen her on TV, and she also does have a couple of interviews and conversations on radio. Thank you so much for joining us, Khosi.
Great to be here again. Thank you so much.
No problem. And guys, please, you're more than welcome to comment if you have any questions, or even if you want to remain private, please, you are more than welcome to send questions to me privately or to the CrossOvr account. So we're really hoping at the end of this conversation, firstly, that you don't feel alone if grief is something that you've been dealing with this year. But secondly, we hope to at least give you a few tools that you can take away with. And look, just the first question. Before that, actually, I wanted to read a quote that I just stole from one of the team members' WhatsApp statuses. If I can find it quickly. When you set up everything and then when you actually need to find it and then something happens, you're like, why? Okay, here it is. It says here, so it's a quote by someone called Earl Grollman, and he said, grief is not a disorder, a disease, or a sign of weakness. It is an emotional, physical, and spiritual necessity. The price you pay for love, the only cure for grief is to grieve. So just to start off with that, what is grief? How can we define that?
Yeah, so you literally stole that quote out of my mouth, because
really? Okay.
Yeah,
great minds.
It is just the most honoring, a quotation or description of grief, in that it is about, ultimately, it is the personal anguish, the torment, the suffering, the inner turmoil that we experience as a result of some adverse event that has happened in our lives. And there are many of these events, and it could be loss, it could be loss in terms of death, it could be loss in terms of having lost something. We have lost, as you said, rightfully so, that in this year, we have lost, a year, as it were. We have lost our sense of life It is the seismic traumatic experience collectively for the human community, as it were. So it is that feeling, and it has elements of physical, in that we experience it in our embodied selves. It is also mental. It affects how we think about life, how we think about ourselves in relation to ourselves, to other people, to our prospects in life. It affects us also emotionally, in terms of no part of ours is left untouched by the pain of it. So it is pervasive, and it is also spiritual or psychological. And I want to use those two words interchangeably, in that it also takes us to a place where we begin to perhaps question the fundamentals. It will either move you towards faith in God, or where was God in all this, and shift you in the opposite direction. But what I'm saying is, it is of the proportion where nothing is ever left the same as it was before. Your life changes. Things as you have known them, life is pulled from under your feet, as it were.
And I just want to get into, so you know how we probably dealt with grief before. It was more of an individual, like something maybe happened to you and your family was affected. But now we're dealing with a collective trauma, right? I was just looking at the number of deaths in the country right now. So 16,667 deaths from COVID this year. And I just did very basic calculation. Please don't judge my maths, people. I am a social scientist. So if we just triple the number, we're just assuming it affects maybe the family and friends. We'll just ballpark around 50,000 people have been affected. So is there a difference perhaps like pre what you consider a crisis and post a crisis? Like when the world or the community is experiencing a crisis, like does that affect how we grieve?
It does. I think the one thing that is particularly unique about this time is that, as we say, it has redefined, it has recalibrated our social ways of being as human beings. And we talk about grief and bereavement. We also have to talk about mourning, the mourning, the rituals, the customs, the rites that go with that experience, and as we all know, one of the things that has happened and has been quite a significant marker of this time is the way that it has intruded so intrusively into all those rights that we associate with how we experience and process our losses. So we all know that, even before we get to the loss, for example, I was talking to a doctor just the other day who was talking about, how one of her patients, the fact that when a person goes to hospital, we know that we're going to see them. We're going to visit them. We have it's given that we're going to have that right to visit them. And with COVID, all that was taken away from us, and so many people were so unprepared for that, not being able to see the person. So it's a total overhaul, and a traumatic overhaul for that matter, that we have to factor in and have to live with and live through and find a way of making sense of this adverse event, plus the circumstances within which we now have to make sense of it, if you know what I'm saying. So there's that double dilemma and challenge to it.
Is it crazy to expect that we can properly process what has happened? Because I was just thinking, even anecdotally, like the conversations, like my family and I were having a conversation earlier today, and one of my parents was listing the amount of people who had passed away where we had lived a couple of years ago, and it was a list of 5-6 people. So you're having this it's very difficult to process those kind of numbers. So there's an individual pain. So people are individually losing people they love. And then we're also receiving, even if you may not be personally affected, you're also receiving a lot of information about people you knew, even if you're not close to them, who are just gone, who are no more. So like, I don't know if I'm clear, but just like our ability to process the kind of information that we're receiving. Yeah.
So I mean, we are overwhelmed, and I think the one thing that has happened during this time, and particularly at level 5, You know, when we were so locked into these little cabins of our homes and not allowed to move out, and then we are bombarded with all this information, and you know, we see these images of numbers just going up globally and so on, and you watch these statistics, you know. So on the one hand, we just feel overwhelmed, we are traumatized, we feel our own sense of vulnerability, because you know, what makes me so sure that I'm not going to be one of those people? You know, who of my loved ones is also going to be part of these numbers? And if not me, why not me? Why do I think that I should be entitled to the privilege of living through this when other people have, you know, have experienced so many and multiple deaths? So what it does is that it really calls so deeply in us to our capacity for comprehending the immensity, the magnitude and depth of this. But what it also does is that it overwhelms us, you know, because we just become so, it's just so insurmountable. You have no, there's a way in which we get paralyzed by it all. And I think I saw a meme recently, somebody was saying, you know, COVID has lost its respectability.
Definitely.
You know, leave while you've still got dignity, when people are still trying to make sense of you and respecting you. But like, people are tired. We have been, our resources, our coping resources have been on overdrive. You know, we have had to reorganize our working lives, working from home, and your children being at home. What, now schools are open, now schools are closed. How do we configure all of that? So I think, you know, we have been thrown. If you talk about existential thrownness, this is it, right? Yeah. So yeah, and the ramifications will continue to reverberate, because you know, of course, there's beyond the physical deaths, there's been a death of a whole lot of things, a death of a life that we have had, a death of opportunities, a death of income, a death of certain sense of securities about how we have planned our lives. Many people plunge themselves into debt by buying properties, cars, and so on, and the very next month, you know, we're locked down without an income. So you know, so much has happened to us.
And one of our community members just shared here, she says here, mourning my mother's death was very painful during this time, because we could not do all the things we would have done as a family had she passed during normal times. So, you know, the gathering of the family, the sitting together, the singing together, the laughing, the reminiscing, all of those things that we just naturally do to help heal and to be together. In as much as in normal times, sometimes it will frustrate us, but I think there's healing in those rituals, you know, a week that people are coming to see you, and then all the way till the day that, you know, you bury your family member, and then, you know, you sort of go back to life.
Yes, no, absolutely. You know, we talk about these, and hence I was saying we can't talk about grief and bereavement without talking about the mourning rituals, rites, and customs that we have, you know, observed to commemorate this. Because what we are saying is, you know, it is about conferring meaning and symbolic significance to this experience, but it is also about connecting us with this person in their physical absence. It is about commemorating the relationship, the journey, the experiences that we have had with them, and being able to gather and share those, you know. And in the same house, at one moment there will be wailing, but in the next minute there will be laughter.
Yeah.
You know, it takes us through, it helps us to process this. It helps us to navigate this new reality that we will have to live with. And all of that has been now thrown asunder, you know. And I think the one important thing at this particular time, and, you know, to honor what has been commented on that you have just read, is that the one thing we always need to in a sense, and we are forced to have to make a new, to redefine all these things, in the sense that I'm saying, right now we need to have a perspective about grief being my personal anguish, my loss. And there is no processes out there that will get to that, because that is personal. That's my internal landscape and my internal journey, right? That I need to honor that as best I can. But then to recognize that rituals are, yes, and very much linked to our grieving and bereavement, but that the two are not necessarily mutually, inclusive. That just because we can't have the rituals doesn't mean I cannot mourn, that I cannot experience the grief, that I, in the best or the deepest way that I can, that I cannot cry and so on. That give yourself permission to do everything that you can to validate your grief.
I actually want
symbolic, ceremonies that we have around it.
Yeah, and I think that segues into, I think, a lot of the myths that we have around grieving, because, like we said, because a lot of us, and look, I'm really generalizing, we're all here Africans, so I think there are a lot of similarities in terms of the way that we grieve, or we tend to do things in a collective. So the challenge with processing anything individually, especially with something as difficult as grief, becomes a bit of a challenge. And I'd seen something, and perhaps we could unpack it a bit. I was reading up, and what I saw online was myths about grief, and I got this off the SADC website, and perhaps we can just talk through that, so that to hopefully offer some comfort to those who are here on the call, to get some understanding that there's no right or wrong way to do this thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. We all, I think you're touching on that dynamic between the universal singularity of our lives. So on the one hand, we are, as you say, a collective people. We are part of a society, and our rituals move from the level of individual to family to community, so they reverberate throughout those three ecological systems that we operate in and live in. But it is important to recognize that our grief is very personal.
Yeah.
So there is, it doesn't have to look like, behave like anybody else's, because it touches you in your own uniquely individual way of being, and your own uniquely individual connection and relationship with the person or the experience that you're mourning.
And also
permission to honor ourselves in that way.
Definitely. And I'm also just thinking, even does your personality type have bearing? I mean, there are people who are more emotive. So like when something big happens to them, like for me, I'm a fold in and run away person and just be in my corner, like when something really big happens. And then there are people who are just better able to express their emotions in that space and time. So does your personality have a bearing on how you interact or react to something like grief?
No, absolutely. And the way that you will, show up, or the way that you will be with yourself and express yourself during that time is actually an expression of your personality. So as you say, some people, if we just use the words introverts and extroverts, introverts probably they want their own space. They want to be left alone. They want to process it alone. And when they are ready, they will come out and have conversation about it. Whereas extroverts want to talk about it in the moment, because talking about it helps them to process and deal with it, So it is about us respecting those individual dynamics. And let me say, coming back to the collectivity of us as Africans and the ways that we do things, that it's sometimes in that collective, we do suffocate the individual. And what I'm saying by this is, sometimes you find that you are a person who's an introvert and who really would like to process this loss on your own. But what happens? There's people all the time. There's people all the time, so that you don't get to have your own moment. And what it ends up being is that instead of processing your own loss, you are now looking after all these people. And it now becomes a burden of responsibility that now takes you away from this experience to be looking after everyone. So, it is a double-edged sword. But that, I think, what is important in our families, in the smaller, conclaves or groups that we are, your sister is a certain person, and you may perhaps want to help other relatives to understand that, no, leave her for now. She will deal with it in her own way because that's how she is. So that people don't want to impose their own ways on others when it would not serve them to do so.
Yeah, thank you. That's so helpful. And guys, please, you're more than welcome to asking if you have any questions about what you're going through or someone in your life that you're going through, and we're definitely going to get into that, please feel free to ask. This Khosi is here to answer all of our questions. And I just want to talk through all those myths, right? So the first myth is, so I got this over on the SADC website. So that's the South African Association for Depression and Anxiety Group. Yes, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, yes. And the first myth that I just want to read here, it says here that the pain will go away faster if you ignore it.
Yeah. Well, it is a myth.
That interesting.
Yeah, it is a myth. And pain is part of the human journey. And whether we suppress it or express it, it is an existential given. Right. So sometimes, for a number of reasons, part of them being how we are socialized not to express and therefore to suppress our pain. So people may feel that they are not entitled to, and let's also go to that place of how we are socialized as Africans. This thing of, they'll be giving you a hiding, and then 1 minute you're screaming and they tell you to shut up. And then when you shut up, they give you a beating even more so because, oh, okay, so you're not feeling this pain. So we are constantly thrown, we are given all these contradictory messages. And that could result in us not knowing what to do when the moment comes, but it definitely, it does not go away. And pain is, as you say, the price we pay for love, for loving, for caring, because if we didn't feel, if we didn't have any special connection or relationship with whatever it is or whoever it is that we have lost, we wouldn't feel that. So it is honoring, what you have had. So it is not something to be ashamed of.
Yeah, and just to ask, I think that's a really powerful point. I'm just thinking about how a lot of us function. We tend to want to avoid pain at all costs. So I'm just wondering, what would how much better would our lives be if we accepted that pain is just a normal part of life, that you're going to experience it in the same way that you'll experience joy, the same way that you'll love, that you're going to cry. So how much better would our lives be if we just accepted, like, listen, as long as you're human and as long as you love, pain may happen.
Yeah. Well, if you I always say, if you think about it, birth is such a painful experience, and the first thing when you are born, the first thing they do is they slap you, so that's our welcome,
Yes.
grief into this side of life. So let's embrace it. Of course, I mean, it is not something we want to will ourselves into, but it is also not something we want to suppress and deny, because the danger with that is that it then will become toxic and express itself in toxic ways, because you have not honored, you have not honored that feeling. It will then transmute and express itself in, you will bleed over other things. Because
definitely. And sorry, just to read out to everyone, we're experiencing a slight delay in our video feed. Please, we ask for your patience. I hope that what is being shared is really helpful to you, and you're at least able to hear and listen to what Sis Khosi is amazingly sharing. It is on YouTube, so you also have an opportunity to watch it back. And I have another comment here that's just sent to me privately, Sis Khosi, and it says here, speaking about physical illness, this person's grandmother once told them, when you get sick, either get well soon or die. People tend to get tired if you're sick for too long. How does this apply to grief? Should I read it again? It says here, speaking about physical illness, this person's grandmother said, when you get sick, either get well soon or die. People tend to get tired if you're sick for too long. How does this apply to grief? Is there a reasonable time limit to grief? After which basically, yeah, is there a reasonable time for grief? Like, when is it like ridiculous? Is there ever such a thing that like after 3 years you should be over this thing?
Sure. First of all, let me just say, that was such a rough way to get a message across. And I have to say that I am one of those people who, because I was brought up by a mother who would say, if you're going to be sick, make sure you're really sick, because people will get tired of you, and it makes sense at the time, because, when you're children and, you're too lazy to wash dishes or do something, and I've got tummy ache or I've got a headache. And my mom would say, if you keep doing that, we're going to get used to you getting a headache after eating. And the day you really do have a headache, we're going to just dismiss you and say, she always does that all the time. And because of that, I will never say I am sick until I am really sick. They know by the time I tell you I'm sick, I've been sick for a while, because I don't want to say it unless it's really, really, really. So in their wisdom, in trying to get a message across, and one of the things is like, use these, these extreme fear tactics, right? But getting back to the question around grief, there is, as I've said earlier on, there is no straight line through healing, right? So unlike, and I always like to make,
Sorry, it's powerful. I'm just thinking there's no straight line through healing. And I think a lot of us want that. We want the formula that's going to get us from point A to point B, so this thing can be gotten done with.
Yeah. And I think part of the problem there is that we tend to take a medical model understanding of, and there's a difference between cure and healing. So medicine talks about curing something, and cure in the medical sense is like, if you've got an abscess, they can quantify exactly how much antibiotic you need, to deal with this. So they will tell you exactly, you need to take this much 3 times a day for a week, and it'll clear, and that's cure. Whereas healing is different. Healing, the word healing comes from wholeness. It is about restoring us to our wholeness.
Oof.
Right? And so it is not a straight line. And, we will, it's a roller coaster journey. It has its intensities, and you will experience yourself having taken one step, and maybe a week later you feel, oh, it feels like I've accepted this, I'm okay with it. And then 3 weeks later, boom, you're back to ground zero, as if you have just heard this news. So we need to allow ourselves those moments. We need to allow ourselves that we will yo-yo in and out of this process, and it will never be a straight line. The question, however, then is, how much is enough? Right? And I think what people are suggesting in that question is that there is a sense in which you've got to move your focus onto other things. So in other words, not to over-invest in the loss, in the cup being half empty, but see what is left in life. Because there can be a sense of emptying and this loss of purpose altogether as a result of this. And we'll live our lives consumed by this loss, and forgetting that in losing something, so much as has been left. And I think that's what, you know, people are just trying to say, let's orientate ourselves back into a fuller perspective of life. Yes, as painful as it is to have lost someone, they were part of, in a sense, they were a slice of a much bigger loaf of bread called life.
So, but maybe to ask a follow-up question to that, if you are, if there's someone in your life who you feel like, okay, they're not moving past this grief, maybe they lost a friend or they lost their partner, it's been 3-4 years, and they're living in the my life is empty scenario. Is it cause for concern? Or is, as a person who's offering sort of that support to that person, are you, I don't know if you get what I'm saying, like, is it, would you be alarmed by saying, yo, it's been 4 years, like you need to get back to life? Or as a person who's supporting, are you just meant to still be there and be like, look, I'm here, I got you, whatever, however much time you need to get through this healing process, it's all okay?
No, I think there's a point at which you got to have the person snap back to life and not be an accomplice of this emptiness, and kind of help them shift their focus away from the loss into what is present, and help them to begin, because the essence is that life is not about finding happiness, it's about creating it. You know, so and the other question becomes, do you think being this way honors this person? You know, do you think this is how they want to see you 3 years later? This is how they want you to honor their life, their death, the relationship that you have with them. Do you think that this is the best way that you can do that? And do you think this is what they want for you? And if not, what would they want for you?
I'm getting quite a few questions to my inbox, so thank you guys so much for being brave enough to share. And this person sent to me privately saying they feel more pain talking about it than keeping it to themselves. How detrimental is that? How does one learn to be vulnerable in moments of pain? So actually, thank you so much for that question to the person who sent it, because I was just thinking, you know how we are brought up in African culture, you don't share like the deepest, most painful things, because it's ugly, because you're going to be judged, because you can't count on the people around you to be able to have the tools to be able to support you. So we're all taught to, if it's really deep and really personal, you need to hide that thing, like dig it, actually bury it to like the same way, okay, that's maybe a bit extreme, but almost bury it in the same way that you've buried this person who you loved has passed away. So I think, how does that affect our ability to be vulnerable? Because I know I wasn't brought up to necessarily share the things that are most like painful to me.
So I think the one thing, and you make a very important point in terms of how we are socialized. So it's a combination of our own personality and the social scripting that takes place in our life journey. So one of the things is, for me, I would always say that, yes, I do understand the challenges of expressing ourselves to other people. I think for me, the important thing is to be honest with yourself about your pain. So in other words, I don't need to share with you what I'm feeling, but when I'm feeling it, that I need to allow myself to cry. So that I'm honoring how I'm feeling. But the double damage would be when I don't share it with anyone else, but I also deny it to myself. I don't know if I'm making
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
and we have another comment here, Nati just shared here, regarding collective grief. Is there a level of subconscious trauma that we're experiencing? I say this because I'm someone who considers herself emotionally self-aware, and I thought I was feeling my way through everything until last month, when there was no personal loss, but I felt extremely overwhelmed, presumably from the mental onslaught of everything we're witnessing. Unati, I could totally relate to that. So, and having not personally, experienced something, but because the world has gone to, it's a bit crazy right now. You sort of have moments where you're like, whoa, like this is a lot. I'm overwhelmed. I need a moment to just step away, to sleep, to catch my breath. Yeah. Is there a level of subconscious trauma that we're all dealing with?
I think we all are, in the sense that we were all thrust into this dilemma, unprecedented dilemma, and we have all had to overhaul our lives.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think you just walk down the street, and I was making the observation, and I was saying, I think the one thing that all of us in this world currently have in common is a mask. We may not have anything else as common as the one item that we all possess is a mask. Something that's been confined to the medical, people and in a hospital and so on. Now it has become a social item that everybody, so absolutely we have. But the thing about trauma is always that, in as much as it is universal, the trauma will meet us in our own individual, let's say, capacity to handle and process the trauma, so that, people have been differently affected by things like the lockdown. It's been traumatic. It's been absolutely traumatic for some people, whereas for other people, it's been the opportunity they needed, let's call it even the excuse they needed to be able to just slow down, because life has just been so fast-paced, so it will meet us in our own individual circumstances, and it will call on our capacity to process information and to fall forward with the experience that we are going through. So yes, we have all experienced the trauma, and all of us will process it in our own ways.
What do you think we will have learned about the new way of grieving, right? Because we don't know what this pandemic is going to look like, whatever the phasing out is going to be, the vaccine, or, so what do you think we will have learned that will probably serve us better, as we deal with whatever this post-COVID reality will be? Do you think we will appreciate both the opportunity to sit with ourselves and recognize? I mean, I can definitely say, perhaps not for the grief, but I've had an opportunity to be more self-aware through this COVID period because I got time, I'm by myself, all of these things. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting question that I have deliberated myself and asked myself, do we quickly want to just go back to our own, our old ways as the human community, or are we going to use this as an opportunity to redefine? Because yes, there is both to it. And it is about what each one of us chooses to make of it. And on some level, collectively, what we choose to make of it. Because let me make an example here of, we've been talking in the corporate world about working from home, and we've diddled with it. And some companies have sort of dipped their toes in it. But, but all of us, every morning, our conversation is about traffic. Right? The trauma we have been putting ourselves through every day of these unending sausage machines of people going into an office and back home, and the stress of all that. And on some level, I just think life just said to us, just get on with it already. So you're busy, fiddling around. Here's an opportunity. Everything's going to stop. This is how you're going to do this thing. So now we have an opportunity to reconfigure those things. Who really needs to be at the office and why? But I'm not necessarily saying that it is one or the other, or that the one is better than the other. All I'm saying is we have an opportunity to rethink and not just do things, be on autopilot because this is how it's always been. This is the opportunity it has given us to ask different questions. And of course, part of asking those questions comes with the possible rejuggling and reshuffling and recalibrating of things where, I mean, I've had friends who have said in their organizations, what has become clear is that, you know, they don't need as many people for this. They, you know, from a cost point of view, office space, canteens and cleaning staff and so on, it's much cheaper to buy people fiber connectivity and make sure, you know, sort of thing. So yeah, there's all within this experience, and it is up to us how we use it to better our quality of life, because what it has given us is that pause moment, because we've not had that. It's just been this autopilot and this treadmill that's just been on the move, and for a moment we have that opportunity.
Yeah, and perhaps like as look, your time flies as always when we're talking. Perhaps we could give people some tools about how to deal with grief. Not everyone's able to afford therapy. Look, we did mention the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. You can find them online. They've been having free sessions on Facebook. They have a hotline and everything. You can definitely find them online. But not many people are able to access therapy or even have doubted to get onto Facebook or to call someone. So what are some practical tools we can give people to how to deal with it, or even to help someone who's in their life and they're dealing with grief?
Yeah, I think it is easier to say, you know, from a point of view of helping someone, it is to check with them, to not come from our own assumptions of what will be helpful for them, to check with them what they will find supportive. So there are things that you may know, for example, that they need some food and so on. You know, there are things that we can do spontaneously, thinking about what it is that they need that we can help them with, perhaps to pick up their child and drop the child to school or from school and so on, or to offer to take their child for a weekend or for a day, and those sorts of things. But to also check with them what they would find supportive, and to always assure them of our availability should they need a different type of support. You know, that I am a text away. I don't want to overwhelm you. I don't, you know, but I'm a text away. So if you should change your mind and you would like this and the other, please, I'm available to do that, and offer the things that we know they would appreciate. From a personal point of view, I think for me, we have experience of grief as the human community. This is not the first time we are going through things. We have experience of grief. We have lost many things before. We have continued to live in ways we have had to adjust and so on. And on the one hand, I'm just trying to normalize that it is unique, but it is not a unique experience for us to process. You know, so to not forget that we have lived before, we have lived through this, right? And that expression, and this too shall pass, it is equally true of this time. You know, that we have lost, we have found meaning, and to keep our eye on the fact that we are still here. We are still here, and we still have a kind of a responsibility to live this life now that we are on this, while we are on this side, and to honor the pain, because as you say, you know, the grief is the price we pay for having loved, and the only way to get beyond it is, the operative word is through, and to understand that word through means it's a process. There is the other side. There is the other side. So allow yourself to walk through that valley, that shadow of pain and darkness at that time, and know that there is the other side. Never forget that.
Oh, thank you so much, Ms. Khosi. I just to summarize what you said. So if someone in your life has lost a loved one, check with them what they find supportive. I think what you just said is really powerful. Don't assume that they need you calling them every day, or that they need space. Just really try to find out from them, and find out practically how you can help them. Do they need groceries for it? Do they need babysitting services? Do they need emails sent for them? Do they need someone to go to the bank for them? You know, and I think what you just said is so powerful, that it's a process. that healing is a journey and that you're meant to go through it to deal with it, you know. And thanks so much, Nokuthula, for just saying, indeed, those acts of thoughtfulness and love really make a difference when faced with grief. But I was just thinking, just one final question, like time has flown, I can't really believe we're almost at 8:30 already. What if the person doesn't know? And that sounds like a really basic question. But I think that in this day and age, this may sound a bit judgmental, but we may sometimes be not as long suffering. We don't know how to go the distance with people. Sometimes we may be a bit microwavy, just like, you know, we're on a deadline. This is meant to happen. This is meant to happen. Okay, this person's going through this. Man, it's been a year. Let's keep it moving. You know, what can you say to those of us who are impatient in life and don't know how to just sit and be there and be present without doing?
Sure, that's a whole conversation on its own. To learn to just be, right?
Yeah.
And that is so important. And it's something that we need to train ourselves consciously and deliberately to do, because we have become, you know, from childhood, we are whisked away to be doing something. So we're constantly on the move. We have learned that we have to be productive as human beings, and productive means moving, you know, showing up, doing something in order to achieve something. And it is just as important to learn to be. And I'm sure everybody, you know, will resonate with the be still. Be still. And we have to train our minds and train ourselves. Just like when we want to develop those muscles, you have to, it's a practice, it's a discipline. And as it says, and know. You know, so there is knowledge, there is wisdom, there is gift in that being still enough, being present enough, because we are so externally focused, as you say, you know, and we become absent landlords, absent from ourselves.
Oh, Sis Khosi, do you know that you just dropped bombs like in such a chilled way? Absent landlords, like how do you come up with these words? I'm like, wait, what? But thank you so much. I don't know if there's any parting shot that you have, just in terms like, what do you want people to really understand about grief? And then we're going to close it down, guys. I don't know if anyone's got a really burning question, but thank you so much for joining us. I pray you've at least learned one thing, and this, if not, at least it's been a source of comfort to you to know that a lot of people are dealing with this. But Sis Khosi, do you have just, what is it that you want people to really understand about this?
What I want us to understand is the distinction between grief, that allow yourself to grieve. Because again, I'm going to, you know, repeat this, that's the price we pay for the relationships that we have with people, right? So and the important thing is to understand that rituals evolve, that they are part of our social evolution. So the ways that we have been, the rituals that we have been observing have evolved over time because of circumstances, and human beings were never static. So this doesn't necessarily mean it is a loss. It is a loss because we are at this phase in our lives, because we experience that we can't do what we have done, but we are open to different things. So for example, one of the beautiful things about this time has been the fact that people have been able to, even though you're in a different country, and for example, you can't attend a funeral in your, you know, in your country, people have been able to Zoom and all these things technology has enabled us to do. Allow ourselves to take advantage of what is available and possible. Understand that this is a time of survival. When all is well, we can go back and you know, and honor those rituals that we still wish to honor in order to commemorate the loss that we've experienced. But let's not get hung up on rituals. Remember that grief is very personal, so allow yourself that pain and that journey and processing to healing over that experience.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Sis Khosi. To the community, thank you so much for joining us. We pray that this has been useful for you. And we can find Sis Khosi on Twitter. I think I saw that you're also on Instagram. And where else can people find you if they'd like to reach out to you?
They can find me on my phone number. That's the easiest one.
Okay, are you okay? Okay, so look, if anyone wants to reach out directly to her, please reach out to the CrossOvr team privately, and then we'll share it. If she's comfortable with that, we'll share it with you.
Yeah.
We don't want to have you bombarded today just on here. So if there's anyone who'd really like to specifically reach out to Cisco, so you can please let us know privately, and we'll sort that out for you. Have a blessed evening. Enjoy the rest of your week. Be well and heal. All the best. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, please, how am I forgetting this? Please, can we see you as we're leaving out? I'm so sorry. We'd love to see all your faces. It's because we'd love to see who she's been talking to. We love all of your profile pictures, but please switch on your cameras. We'd like to say hi, smile a bit. It's been a bit heavy, but we can at least smile a bit as we're leaving. Please switch on your cameras as you leave.
I miss my friends from the 7th grade. I miss the days when we thought the same, playing silly games in choir every day. Man, I miss those days. I miss the days we would bunk school. It wasn't smart, yeah, but it was cool. There were no consequences for acting like a fool. I miss those days, man, I really do. Oh, things fall apart and I don't know when it started. Oh, right now these memories are my